Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you for joining us today for Disaster Recovery as a Service to Azure with Zerto. So my name is James Watts. I'm here from Data Barracks, and I'm very thankful to say today we've been joined by Gijsbert Janssen van Doorn, who is the Technology Evangelist from Zerto. I'll start with what we always kick off with at the front end of our webinars, which is just a quick bit of housekeeping. So the first thing that we always say on a session like this is please don't feel you need to scribble all your notes down. We are recording this webinar and we will be providing the slides afterwards. So as soon as we get this all set up, we'll ping it out either later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning to everyone. We are scheduled for 30 minutes today, and I do say we always try to keep really tight to our timeframes here. I have a lot of respect for everyone's time. I know taking a kind of slot out of your day to be on a webinar is always a difficult thing for us all to do, and so I personally hate it when webinars run really long. So we'll make sure we're really sharp for that period so that you can get back to things afterwards. And we do have some time that we have allotted for any questions. So any questions you have, type those in on the side on the right hand side. If we are able to get through them, we'll go through as many as we can. If there's too many that we can't get through, or if there's anything that we can't answer, I do promise we will always get back to people individually. And then if there are any questions that we think are particularly useful that we don't get a chance to run through on the session today, but would be of use to everyone else, we'll make sure we forward those out to everyone when we send out the details afterwards. And so the last slide, here we are, great, I'm glad everyone can see now. So the last slide that I'm going to talk about today is just something that I always like to mention to folks who are joining us for our webinars. So today we're talking about disaster recovery as a service to Azure using Zerto. So it's a very technical, very technology focused webinar. And we're talking about IT disaster recovery and IT resilience. But if you are interested in these topics, you will no doubt also be interested in the broader subject of business continuity. So something we've been doing for the last couple of years is a business continuity podcast. So you can see the podcast at www.thebcpcast.com, or you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts or iTunes. And it's something that we've been doing for the last 2 years, where we've been going out to the very large organizations, the folks at the Economist Group, BP and The Guardian, and we've been speaking with their business continuity practitioners and trying to take advice from these very large enterprises that have very mature continuity functions, and try to take those lessons and make it useful for everyone else, for folks who perhaps don't have a business continuity manager in their business at all. So do take a look at that. But with that, that's the last point that I have to add. I'll now hand over to Gijsbert.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much. So today we're going to talk about disaster recovery as a service going into Azure. This is what we've been doing for a while now, and we're going to talk about the technology. We're going to talk about Azure a little bit, but I'm going to intro with a topic we like to talk about a lot, and that's IT resilience. So I'm going to quickly introduce IT resilience to you as an audience right now. So when we're talking about IT resilience, we have 3 pillars. That's protect, transform, and innovate. And that's something we'll try to enable using our Zerto IT resilience platform. Now, when we look at IT and how IT started, it all started with physical servers. And we've been through quite the evolution when we look at IT, because not even that long ago, virtualization was introduced. And that was changing the way we did IT, but also changing the way we needed to protect our IT. Now, then we stepped into software-defined data centers, a lot more flexibility in our data centers using all those virtualization technologies, and also seeing parts of the infrastructure move into the software layer, things like networking, storage, but also replication. And that's something that we did. And now when we're looking at what is on the CIO's agenda right now, we're talking about hybrid cloud and multi-cloud solutions. So effectively using the cloud for whatever reason you need to, but also make sure that your workloads are protected in those environments. Now, when we look at traditional DR solutions, they were basically built for the unplanned disruptions. Things like user errors, natural disasters, actual infrastructure failing, or security or ransomware infections where you needed to protect yourself from. Now, when looking at disruptions, there's also planned disruptions. Things like data center consolidations, upgrading your environment, moving to cloud, like migrations or mergers and acquisitions, where you maybe acquired a company, they have a new, they have their own environment, and you want to consolidate it as quickly as possible into your own environment. Now, these kind of things also go hand in hand with downtime. And as you're now running a 24/7 business, you want to minimize that downtime as well. And when we look at the unplanned versus planned, we're basically talking about reactive, like unplanned event, versus proactive, like the planned events. And what IT resilience is about is actually getting those use cases and making sure that downtime is minimized, whether you're using it for planned maintenance, planned downtime, or unplanned downtime. So basically, IT resilience is the ability to accelerate transformation by adapting to change while, and this is the important part, protecting the business from disruptions. Now, let's dig into disaster recovery as a service with both Zerto and Data Barracks, because I think that especially the combination of those two is really important. So let's look at this do-it-yourself disaster recovery sites, where you have to maintain your own site, you have to maintain your own data center, and there's a lot of things involved that you need to pay attention to. You have to have your own data center, you have to have the proper cooling, power, facilities. Maybe you're just co-locating servers, but you still need those rack servers, the storage, sizing, a lot of administration. I'm not going to mention everything you see on the right side. Basically, it's a permanent CapEx cost. A lot of time, a lot of effort you have to put into that. Now, this is where Azure came in and how they revolutionized the way you can now consume cloud for a DR use case. Basically, what they've done, they've created a self-service portal using your credit card on demand. You can just take the resources you need. They basically have limited capacity. It's all on demand. It's really easy to consume. That's important as well. It's also really cost effective because you only pay for what you use. Now, if we look at the specific DR use case, when we look at cloud, now this is basically you're using it to burst capacity. Now, let's say this is my production environment. I've got a bunch of CPUs, I'm using storage, and I have different types of workloads. I have workloads that need more performance. I've got workloads that need more CPUs or more RAM. Now, if I would compare this to a do-it-myself DR site, or maybe an on-premise DR site, I'll have to have all this compute power, this storage power, and all the work to maintain and install and update that environment. I'll have to have that ready to go. Everything you see on the left side, all that RAM, all those vCPUs, all those resources, all that metal is something I need, or that iron that needs to be on the target side. Now with cloud, it's completely different because you burst it. The resources are available. You only pay for what you use. You only pay it when you actually use it, and it's really easy to set up. So this is a huge difference from doing it yourself and getting it into the cloud. Now, when we look at like an example TCO calculations, and we've just taken some numbers, and it's a mid-sized environment. So we're using 300 VMs, a total of 1,607 CPUs or vCPUs, 4.23 terabytes of RAM, and we've got 150 or 149 terabytes of disk space. Now, when we compare that to doing it ourselves, we need all that storage. We need all those servers available. We need to have licenses available. We have DR site management involved, and there's a lot of costs involved there. Now, if we compare that to using Zerto Virtual Replication, and it says 5.5, right? 5.0 right there. We have 6.0 out right now. I think that's a typo on my side. Apologies for that. So if we look at that, the only thing we need from a server's perspective is what we call a Zerto Cloud Appliance. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in one of the next slides. Storage is only the storage that we consume. Licensing are the licensing that we need to be able to replicate into Azure and the Zerto licensing involved. Now, when you do it yourself, there's no DR site management. I think when you're partnering with a partner like DataBarracks, who they live and breathe DR, they understand DR, and they take away a lot of the other things you need to maintain. They can help you with implementing this. They can help you with actually designing how to protect your applications, and I'll talk about that also in one of the next slides. I think that's about the same cost. But if you take a look at all the savings you make on only the hardware level, that's a lot of savings right there. If we look at this environment, it's about 67% of saving over 3 years, and it doesn't differ. So I'm showing you 300 VMs right now. This could be 100 VMs as well, and there's not going to be a huge difference between the savings whether you're using 100 VMs or 300 VMs. And there's no rack space, power, and cooling that I calculated in this one right now. That's a huge component as well. This is just purely based, it's really conservative, based on the amount of VMs and CPU power and RAM you need, so the actual resources. So the savings is going to be a lot higher than this. Now, to the interesting part. How do I get there? So what do I need to install? So when we look at the environment, let's say, look at the architecture of Zerto and our product. The first thing you need to do is prepare your environment. Now, we support VMware environments or Hyper-V environments, VMware basically 4.5 and up, and Microsoft Hyper-V 2012 R2 and up. Now, we have two components that need to be installed before we can actually start replication. That's the ZVM, which is a Zerto Virtual Manager, basically a Windows application I just install on a Windows server. You can install it in a couple of minutes, and as soon as it's installed, you point it to your virtualization environment, meaning vCenter when using VMware, or SCVMN when using Hyper-V. As soon as that is installed, we'll actually start deploying what we call the virtual replication appliances, and basically these are the worker bees of the solution. They do all the heavy lifting. They have built-in compression, throttling, built-in methods to be able to cope with things like the connection being down between the target side and the source side, and they do all the block level replication. Now, that's what we do. We have a continuous data protection mechanism that we use that has no impact on the production environment or the performance of the production environment, and I think that's really important. And it allows us to achieve RPOs of seconds. So there's no snapshots involved. You don't have to schedule anything. Just point and click. What do you want to protect? Where do we want to protect it to? And we'll do all the rest for you. So it's really easy to use. And I think that's really important as well, especially when you're talking about the protection of your business. Now, when replicating into Azure, we use things like blobs and page blobs, but I'll talk about that in the next one of the next slides. Now, as soon as everything's installed on your local side, we'll have to make sure that you are connected to the Azure data centers or the Azure network. And this is definitely something that DataBarracks can really help you with, because this is one of the most complex things that needs to be done. Now, there's a few things we support. So we need minimum 5 megabits link. Of course, 5 megabits is a little bit on the positive side. Of course, if you want to replicate 100 VMs, we need a little bit more than that, but we have all kinds of sizing tools available for that to be able to support you with that. We can then use site-to-site VPN or use the Azure Express route, where you basically have a direct connection into Azure. What we don't support is any point-to-site VPNs or anything that goes over the public internet. Of course, we want to make sure that it's encrypted, so that's why we recommend using site-to-site VPNs or using a private connection like Express routes. Now, as soon as you have the connection set up to your Azure site, we deploy on Azure what we call a Zerto Cloud Appliance. Now, the Zerto Cloud Appliance, you can deploy that using the Azure Marketplace. And as you've seen on the on-premise site, that's using a ZVM and a VRA. Well, in the cloud, we use the Zerto Cloud Appliance, which basically is a ZVM and a VRA combined. Now, this is where we connect to, and this is where we all replicate to. Now, if we store VMs or replicas into Azure, we use page blobs for that. So we use the storage account on which the ZCA is installed, and we use that storage account to store the VM disks as page blobs. And we use the journal data, and I'll talk a little bit more about the journal and the power of the journal in one of the next slides. And we use journal data, we store that in block blobs to make sure that we use efficiently the storage options available in Azure. So we're actually natively supporting Azure. We're not using any agent technology, we're natively using the APIs available in Azure. So the ZCA is a scaled architecture. We support about 200 VMs per ZCA. You don't need any recovery VMs. The only thing we use is those page blobs and those block blobs to store all the data. Once you actually perform a failover or a failover test, then we'll actually need those VMs and we'll create those VMs as needed, and you'll only start paying for them once they are created. So there's no upfront cost for that or anything. Now, I talked a little bit about the journal, and the journal is something we use to recover your applications. Now, how do we protect those applications? So what we use is a virtual protection group. And a virtual protection group is basically a logical container that has VMs in there, and all those VMs are protected consistently. That means if I have an application that consists of multiple VMs, application server, database server, all kinds of other servers, but combined they are an application or maybe an application chain that uses an enterprise service bus to communicate, we protect that as one whole. Basically meaning once I recover it to Azure, all those VMs will be recovered to exactly the same point in time. We'll maintain write order fidelity, and you can also pre-configure all the recovery settings on that container, on that virtual protection group, meaning that you can point it to the right networks available in Azure and make sure that it uses all the right instance sizes. Now, this is something where you can actually achieve a better cloud TCO because we allow you to recover to an instance that uses maybe less CPU power than the production site. Especially when in a DRaaS scenario, you may be expecting or taking for granted that you're running on a less performant environment by using different types of instances, maybe with less CPU power or less RAM, but that will give you a better cloud TCO. Now, it doesn't matter whether those VMs on the source side are running on different storage environments or local disks or a storage array, we'll protect them as one whole because we are integrated on that hypervisor level. Besides that, anything that you're used to from a VMware perspective or a Hyper-V perspective, live migration, storage vMotions, DRaaS, HA, that's all supported. So we just track where the VMs are and we'll make sure that they keep on protected. Now, once you have those VPGs configured, you can also configure an SLA on those virtual protection groups. And every virtual protection group can have its own SLA. An SLA means the recovery point objective and the journal history. So how far can I rewind my applications or rewind my VMs back in time? Now, talking about that rewinding back in time, I told you a little bit about a journal that allows you to go back in time, and we can rewind those virtual protection groups back in time. So let's compare that to, let's say, backup technology, where I take a backup once a day. If something happens at the end of the day, I'll have to rewind to a backup that was taken the night before. So that could potentially make me lose hours worth of data and hours worth of work. Now, what the journal allows you to do is rewind your application to a specific point in time, whether that's minutes ago, 30 days ago, or seconds ago. So instead of recovering a VM as it was the night before, we allow you to rewind to that specific VM as it was 5 seconds ago. And this is really powerful, especially in ransomware use cases. Let's say ransomware hit you, and you'll only notice when ransomware hit you after it's done. So after your files are encrypted. Now with Zerto, you can recover to a couple of seconds before that ransomware attack hit you, and you can rewind your entire data center, specific applications, specific VMs, or even files. So we allow you to recover files as they were 5 seconds ago. And because we have continuous data protection, we actually allow you to recover a VM that was created 10 minutes ago and deleted 30 seconds ago. So that's really powerful technology, the journal we use. Now, every time you do a recovery, of course, you also want to make sure that you can prove that you can do a recovery to your environment. So every time we do an operation, we generate automatically a report. Now, this report is generated whether you're doing a failover test, because besides being able to failover into Azure, we also allow you to test that failover without impacting performance or without impacting the uptime of the production environment. So basically, we allow you to start all your VMs on Azure, test if they work, and then just shut them down again. And during this process, you're still protected and there's no impact to your production site. So after you've done one of those failover tests or one of an actual failover, we allow you to generate this report and use this as a method of proof that you've been able to do a failover, that you've been testing your failover over the last, let's say, every quarter. So this really helps you get those compliance regulations satisfied and getting auditors a document that actually proves that you've done your failover test. Now, as part of this webinar, I would also like to do a quick demo of how this actually works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up the environment to do the demo and show you how we perform a failover into Azure. Okay, so actually quickly checking if everyone can see the right screen now. Yes. So this is a Zerto environment, and this is the dashboard that once you log into Zerto, this is what will actually show you. Now, as I told you, we can set SLAs, and our complete product is SLA driven, meaning that a green block right here means that this specific virtual protection group is achieving its SLA. So once it's orange, you can see there's a problem with that. Once it's red, it's not achieving it's not meeting its SLA. It's really easy in one overview to see what is actually happening. You can see real time what is being replicated. You can see what you are actually replicating. So this is 14 virtual protection group, 42 VMs, protecting an average of a total of 335 gigabytes, and this is my actual RPO across my entire estate right now, 5 seconds. As you can see, we do continuous data protection, so the RPO differs a little bit. Everything we send over the connection is compressed automatically, so this will also show you your current compression ratio. Now, as I told you, we've got 14 virtual protection groups. A couple of them are actually going into Azure, and what it will actually do is I'll perform a live failover of a file server into Azure. Now, when we look at Azure, we have our what we call Zerto Cloud Appliance running there. This is the only machine that's running there right now. We have a few others, but this is from colleagues of mine. So what I'll actually do right now is show you how fast you can actually recover a VM into Azure. So we're going to perform a failover. Now, like I said, I'm going to select the file server to actually go into Azure. It's currently meeting its SLA, so it's replicating and it's getting an RPO of seconds into Azure right now. It will ask me a few questions, but this is also where I can actually change the point in time that I'm recovering to. Let's say this file server had a ransomware infection and it happened like a minute ago. I can actually rewind, as you can see, with a granularity of 5 seconds back in time. Now I'm just gonna rewind it to the latest point I have, and now I'm gonna start that failover. Now, basically what it does right now is it will stop the VM on the source side, and it will start the VM on the Azure side. Now, as you can see, it's running. It's already at 90%, and this is actually how fast you can recover into Azure. And as soon as this one is completed, it will actually show me that I can do a commit I'll explain a little bit more about the commit, but as you can see, failing over before commit, it's waiting on input for me now. That means my VM is actually running in Azure right now. I can go into that VM, I can look at, oh, yep, it's running. What I can do now is start testing. Yes, everything's available again, everything is not encrypted anymore. I accept this as a successful failover, and I can do a commit. Now a commit means, okay, tested it, VM is fine. We'll actually finalize the failover and officially make the target side the production side. I could also do a rollback. Rollback means, ooh, something happened. It was not the right point in time. I had to go back further in time. Rollback, initiate a new failover to a different point in time, and I'm done. So what I'm actually going to do right now is I'm going to click commit, saying, okay, this is fine. We're going to do this. Now, this is a really nice part of Zerto, at least a part that I really like. It's reverse protection. Now, I failed over this file server into Azure. Maybe I had to recover it to a specific point in time because of ransomware. That would mean I would eventually like to run it again on my target side, or on my source side. Now, this is basically failback. So what we allow you to do is reverse the protection as soon as the commit phase is done. So what happens is I start running my VM in Azure. Actually, it's already running in Azure right now. And as soon as I click commit, what we'll do is we'll actually start replicating back to the production side, allowing you, and this is a fully automated process, allowing you to move that workload back to the production side on a planned maintenance window, on a planned way. Because this is fully automated. It only takes you a couple of minutes to actually move it back to your target side after we've done what we call a delta sync. So as you can see, it's really easy to actually use Zerto to replicate into Azure and help you with that. And of course, DataBarracks is a partner that we've been working with for many years now. I mean, they're leading in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner regarding DRaaS as a service. So this is what they do on a daily basis. So they can really help you design the virtual protection groups, and they can really help you set up the entire environment, allowing you to have an orchestrated way to recover into Azure. Now, what we're going to do right now is actually open it up for questions. So if you would please use the questions section in GoToWebinar, I will definitely look at that and try to answer as much as I can.
So thank you. So I was going to jump in here. So this is James again from DataBarracks. Firstly, I want to say thank you for covering so much in such a short window today. I think that was a fantastic kind of whistle-stop tour of Zerto into Azure. Now we have 2 questions already that have come through. So I think probably, I'll throw this one to you, Gijsbert, which is probably unsurprising, perhaps the first question that popped up, and that was why Zerto rather than Azure Site Recovery or ASR?
So one of the biggest things with Zerto is first of all the keep it simple. Really simple. So it's easy to deploy, but one of the biggest advantages is, one, our journal, allowing you to recover back in time. Our ability to support Hyper-V VMware from a single platform without, and this is the most important part, without impacting the performance on the production side. Now, combining all that with our IT resilience platform and our ability to automate most of those things, I think it's for us, or at least maybe for DataBarracks, an obvious choice to actually start using Zerto, as we support most of the environments that are running at customers, but also give you a really easy and managed way to actually perform and install it.
Fantastic, brilliant. No, thank you. So, okay, I have question number 2. And this is, if, as is the case here, we're syncing in near real time, does that make it difficult to dedupe across machines? For example, if I push an update across a dozen application servers, do you need to update and upload that data dozens of times?
So the way we replicate, yeah, so basic answer, yes. So what we'll do is, using those V arrays, we'll only replicate at a block level. Every block is also compressed, and will only replicate the unique blocks for every ES6i server. So we are doing some of it, but not all of it. But because we are using continuous data protection instead of scheduled, let's say snapshot based, we'll have a way. It's more like a stream of data which will go up a little bit, and as soon as everything's been replicated, it will be sent across the connection. So the RPO will go up from a couple of seconds to a couple of minutes. If you compare that to, let's say, a snapshot you'll do once every 2 hours, if due to the level of data that you're replicating right now, or actually generated, we miss one of those snapshot windows, or it takes longer than the other one, your RPO goes up from 2 hours to 4 hours. So that's one of the main differences between using continuous data replication and using snapshots. I hope that answers the question.
I think it certainly does for me. I think we do have some other questions, but I think, as I said at the start, we're always really tight on making sure that we finish on time. Now, there's a couple of really good ones in here, and I think they are all questions that would be useful for everyone else. So what we'll do is we'll put together the answers for this, and we'll make sure that we can send those out to you individually, but also for everyone who's attended to hear. But otherwise, I'm going to tie things up there for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you'll be with us on our next webinar. And thanks again to HighSpec for a really terrific webinar. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You're welcome, James. Thank you.